Funchion.
Thanks very much, Corla. Minister, my question is in relation to skin cancer and I suppose the link that we now know in relation to tanning beds. And this is something that's come to my attention primarily from a woman in the southeast, actually in the same neck of the woods as yourself, Minister Butler. And I just wanted the opportunity for us to kind of discuss this out a bit further. Thanks.
Thanks, Deputy, and thank you very much for tabling the question. The Cancer Registry reported that about a quarter of all cancers diagnosed between 2019 and 2021 were non-melanoma skin cancers. Melanoma of skin accounted for 1 in 20 of the remaining invasive cancers diagnosed, and melanoma of skin accounts for about 1 in 50 cancer deaths every year. It's very important, obviously, that anyone who has any concerns should contact their GP. And I am engaged directly with the dermatology services who are a critical part of all of this, obviously the oncology services as well, in terms of making sure people get rapid access. To your point, Deputy, it's acknowledged that there is no safe limit for exposure to ultraviolet radiation from some beds when it comes to risks of cancer. The National Skin Cancer Prevention Plan, which is 2023 to 2026, it sets out the national actions to tackle our high rates of skin cancer. The plan, it uses a multidisciplinary approach: education, public awareness, behavioural change. And under the public health sunbeds legislation, there is a range of measures that are enforced by the HSE. In addition, you'll be aware that the EU is looking at this, and the EU's response to tackle cancer is set out in the EU's Beating Cancer Plan. Action 18 is the relevant one to this discussion, which has measures to prevent exposure to ultraviolet radiation. And Deputy, this includes some beds, and these are being considered by the EU. My officials are working with the European Commission subgroup on cancer under the Public Health Expert Group. My understanding is that the recommendations are expected to be published before the end of March.
Thanks very much for that, Minister. As I said, I just want to acknowledge a particular woman, Laura, who kind of brought this to my attention, and there's a few others as well, I suppose, that campaign with her. And I think it's one of the issues that we probably don't speak a lot about. And at first, when you say it, people kind of say, well, sorry, well, like, what's the problem or what's the issue here? But then when you look, I suppose, at how much we know now about smoking and cigarettes and their links to cancer, and we have the images on the packaging, and yet with sunbeds, while I acknowledge there is some measures, I suppose it is widely felt that oftentimes those measures are maybe they don't go far enough, and also are they actually being implemented. So, for example, some of the suggestions are that there would be a database that everyone who runs a sunbed facility has to sign up to, because there is sometimes people will go into one particular place and get 10 minutes, and then they'll go down the road somewhere else for another 10 minutes. And we do know that does happen. So if there was a database that people had to sign up to, it would certainly limit usage. And in terms of ID, because there is still, I suppose, an issue of very young, particularly teenage girls. I know some over time, so I'll come back in on my second part.
Thanks very much, Deputy. It is something that I think, between the legislation we have and the EU's work that's ongoing, it is something I think we can go further on. As I was saying, 1 in every 4 diagnosed cancers is a non-melanoma skin cancer, so it is a very, very significant issue. I know when I was a much younger man with a full head of hair, I went to Australia and lived in Bondi Beach, and they had a level of awareness on skin cancer that just did not exist in Ireland, and to this day we don't have the level of awareness that they had 28 years ago when I was there. There is more could be done. It's why we launched the recent plan. The sunbed businesses are regulated here under a 2014 Act. The department tells me that the regulations we have are amongst the most comprehensive in the EU. But there is a question as to whether enforcement could go further and whether awareness could go further.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm glad to hear you acknowledge that, Minister, because I think that's really important. I agree that it probably is an enforcement issue, certainly around ID, around some of the stuff I'm suggesting around a database. I think we could do a lot more as well in terms of schools and transition year and using that opportunity to educate and to create awareness, because there are so many people that think there's no harm in it, and there is still this myth that, sure, it rains most of the time in this country, how can a little bit of sun be that detrimental? And yet when you look at our levels of skin cancer and then people who ultimately pass away from skin cancer, you know, we obviously need to do an awful lot more. And I did want to ask as well, if you'd consider meeting this, they're a small group of mainly women who I suppose feel really strongly because they weren't, I suppose, told all the negative aspects, and to this day at times they're still finding tumours that they're being told or were very much linked to sunbed use in the past. And would you consider meeting with them for some ideas and suggestions in relation to this? I know they'd like to see a straight outright ban, but obviously we'd have to probably take steps, and I welcome as well the EU, and if there's anything else you can say around that in the last remaining minute, I'd appreciate it, around what steps the EU might be taking. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Deputy. The EU recommendations, obviously we need to wait to see. However, the general sense is they are considering restricting access for high-risk groups, the mandatory supervision of the commercial use of sunbeds, the mandatory provision of eye protection, increasing awareness by providing information on the risks associated. I've asked the Chief Medical Officer and her team to engage in a new public health strategy, including prevention. This would be one of the parts of that. So I think between the legislation we have, the EU recommendations that will be coming out, the ongoing preventative work and a refresh of, you know, Healthy Ireland and a greater emphasis on prevention in Ireland, which we have to achieve, I think that could fit in quite well to that.